And I'm going to be speaking about his life, his lessons that we learned from his life. Why? Because unki is mahine se nisbat hai. Mawla Ali radiallahu ta'ala was born in the month of Rajab, on the 13th of Rajab. He was born in this month. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala was related to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam by blood. Unka khuni rishta tha. But he was related to him through three relationships. There were three relationships. The one which is obviously quite famous is that he was the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala was the paternal cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His father was who? Abu Talib. And his mother was Sayyiduna Fatima bint Asad radiallahu ta'ala anha. Abu Talib and the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyidina Abdullah radiallahu anh, they were full brothers. They were full brothers. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's parents and grandfather passed away, it was Sayyidina Abu Talib, it was Abu Talib who took the Prophet ﷺ into his care and looked after him. And the Prophet ﷺ considered Sayyiduna Fatima bin Asad to be like a second mother to him. He ﷺ would say that she is my mother after my mother. And after the announcement of his prophethood, Ilan Nabuwat ke baad, she accepted Islam. And she migrated to Medina Munawwar with the rest of the Sahaba. And when she passed away, the Prophet ﷺ himself lowered her into the grave. And he showed such immense sorrow that he cried for her. And when Sayyidina Ali, Mawla Ali radiallahu ta'ala was born to them, it's believed that he was born within the vicinity of the Kaaba. But kuch riwayat hai ki Mawla Ali radiallahu ta'ala Kaaba Sharif ke andar hi paida hue the. There are some narrations that Mawla Ali was born inside the Kaaba itself. Such a blessed birth this man of Allah had. And there are varying narrations. But the Prophet ﷺ was either 30 or 35 around that age when Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala was born. And when Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anh opened his eyes, when he opened his eyes for the first time, what did he see? He saw the beautiful countenance, the beautiful radiant face of who? Sayyid al-Kaunain, Imam al-Anbiya, Sayyidina Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the second relationship, the first relationship, they were cousins. The second relationship is that Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala was the adopted son of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In Makkah at the time, when Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala was born, the financial situation, the economic situation was very bad. Things had began to get very tough. And Abu Talib, he had 4 children, so four sons, and he had 3 daughters as well. So to lighten the burden for Abu Talib, the Prophet ﷺ and his uncle Sayyidina Abbas radiallahu ta'ala, they agreed to foster 1 child each. They decided to give goad to 1 child each of Abu Talib. So the Prophet ﷺ fostered who? Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. And Sayyidina Abbas, he fostered Sayyidina Jafar al-Tayyar radiallahu ta'ala. So Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, he was raised in the blessed household. He was raised in the household of the Prophet ﷺ from a very young age. This meant that from childhood, he was nurtured by who? None other than the one who is the best of all examples. None other than him who is the best of all teachers, the most perfect role model, Sayyidina Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself. And the third relationship that they have, he was the son-in-law, the damad of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala married the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam's daughter, Sayyiduna Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha. And if you're a father to a daughter, you know that your daughters are particularly precious to you, right? And when the time for getting them married comes, you're very strict. You can say you're very particular in ensuring that the man that you get your daughter married to is of a particular standard. He's of a particular character, that he's suitable for them. So imagine the character, the rank and the esteem of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, that the best of Allah's creation chose him as a husband for his precious daughter. Allahu Akbar. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the age of 40 received revelation for the first time and he declared his prophethood, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala was among the very first to accept Islam. And there's ikhtilaf amongst ulama who was first. Right? Was it Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala? Was it Sayyidina Khadija radiallahu ta'ala? Was it Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala? But the ulama, they reconcile this. How? They say that Sayyidina Khadija radiallahu ta'ala was the first amongst the women to accept Islam. Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala was the first amongst the men to accept Islam. And they say that Sayyidina Ali, Imam Ali radiallahu ta'ala, was the first amongst the children to accept Islam. And the narrations vary, but he was either 5 or 10 years old when he accepted Islam. And from a very young age, what do we see in the life of Sayyidina Imam Ali radiallahu ta'ala? True devotion, true love to Sayyidina Rasulullah. True devotion to him. If someone was to be an Ashiq Rasul, which we do da'wah of, if somebody wants to be an Ashiq Rasul, they should try to be like Sayyidina Ali. Right? He is the best of examples. If you want to be a true lover of the Prophet ﷺ. And one of the most profound displays of love, one of the greatest displays of love that this man of Allah showed was during the time of the Hijrah, the time of the migration, when the Muslims were migrating from Makkah al-Mukarramah to Madinatul Munawwarah. Right? And although the kuffar, right, the mushrikeen of Quraysh, they hated the Prophet ﷺ, right? Even though they hated him, they still believed and still thought that he was one of the most trusted people. He was Ameen, right? They could trust him. So they would often give him, ﷺ, their wealth to look after. So many individuals had left their wealth with the Prophet ﷺ. So he wanted to ensure that before he migrates to Madinatul Munawwarah, all their wealth, all their goods are returned to them. And all these are returned to their rightful owners. So Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he asked Imam Ali radiallahu ta'ala an to stay behind and ensure that these things are returned. But at the same time, the mushrikeen of Quraysh, the mushrikeen of Makkah, they had plotted to assassinate, to kill the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam whilst he was sleeping in his home before he left for Madinah Munawwarah. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Sahaba, they needed a plan. They needed a plan to fool and mislead the mushrikeen of Quraysh. The enemies of Islam, they surrounded the house of the Prophet ﷺ, waiting for the right moment to strike. But when they went in to kill the Prophet ﷺ, they found that he wasn't there. And instead, in the bed of the Prophet ﷺ, who did they find? Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ had tasked Sayyidina Ali with sleeping in his bed for that night. But the Prophet ﷺ had already left for Madinah Munawwarah with Sayyidina Abu Bakr. So this is the bravery, the shaja'at, the bravery, the courage of Imam Ali radiallahu ta'ala. He knew full well that this could mean his own death. Right? That when the mushrikeen then entered the house, it could mean that they will kill him. But this is his bravery, that he volunteered for this task. He showed such loyalty to the Prophet ﷺ that he volunteered for this without any hesitation. And he played significant roles in all of the early battles of Islam. Right? He was a true mujahid, a true warrior of Islam. And in the Battle of Badr, right? In the Battle of Badr, the first major battle of Islam, he was amongst the heroes who fought with unmatched skill. There was nobody who could fight like Sayyidina Ali, right? And as was the custom in warfare amongst Arabs at the time, what would happen is that before the main battle, there would be individual duels, one-on-one combat, right? And in this, it was Imam Ali, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, who volunteered himself to be one of the first ones to fight in the duel. And within minutes, he defeated his opponent with ease, with very little or no difficulty at all. And likewise, in the Battle of Uhud, when the tide turned, and it was the Muslims that were on the back foot, and the kuffar, they were coming towards attacking, the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, was one of the few Sahaba who had surrounded the Prophet ﷺ and were protecting him. But probably one of the most famous battles that Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala is known for is the Battle of Khaybar. There was a fortress in this place of Khaybar that had been besieged for several days. But the Muslims, they couldn't breach it. They couldn't get inside. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he made an announcement. That tomorrow I will give the banner I'll give the lead for this battle to a man who loves Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Allah and His Rasul love him. So all the Sahaba, they were in anticipation. They couldn't sleep that night. That who is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam going to choose tomorrow? Who is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam going to choose? Because the person who he chooses will mean that Allah, that person has the love of who? Allah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The next morning, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he calls for Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu at that time had an eye infection. He had an eye infection. But what did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He places his blessed saliva. He places his blessed saliva in Sayyidina Ali's eyes, and by that mu'jiza, by that miracle, the eye of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala was cured. And then Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, he leads the Muslims in that battle. And it's with the bravery, the courage, the leadership of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala that the Muslims were able to win it in that battle. And they were able to take the fortress at Khaybar as well. And this was not just recognition that he was a great warrior. Not just that. But it's a demonstration of his love. It's a demonstration that not just that he loved Allah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but that Allah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also loved Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. And was he just a warrior? Was he just a fighter on the battlefield? No. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala was also known for his immense knowledge. He was a master in the Quran. He was a master when it came to the rules of fiqh, your practices. He was a master when it came to spiritual wisdom. The Prophet ﷺ says about Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, Ana madinatul ilmu aliyun babuha. That Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala is the gate to the knowledge of the Prophet ﷺ. If the Prophet ﷺ is the city of knowledge, then Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala is the gate to that knowledge. And he had, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, immense love for the other Sahaba ikram. Sayyidina Ali had love for the other Khulafai Rashideen, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. Don't fall for the tricks. And these days on TikTok and all these like sort of online platforms, you have all sorts of propaganda being spread, where people are saying and accusing all sorts, that there was ikhtilaf amongst the Sahaba, there were fights amongst the Sahaba, Sayyidina Ali had this against this Sahabi or this against this Sahabi. No. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala had immense love for Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. You know, every single Sahabi are stars. Every single one of the Sahaba are stars that will guide us. Right? Every single Sahabi is what? Jannati. Every single Sahabi is Jannati. Right? Our belief is that every single Sahabi, from Sayyidina Abu Bakr to the lowest ranking Sahabi of roughly 124,000 of them, every single one of them are what? The crowns on our heads. And we respect every single one of them. Right? Sayyidina Abu Bakr included, Sayyidina Umar included, Sayyidina Usman included, Sayyidina Ali included, Sayyidina Hassan, Sayyidina Hussein, Amir Muawiyah, Sayyidina Abu Sufyan, Sayyidina Hind. Every single one, any person who has seen the Prophet ﷺ with the state of Iman is a Sahabi. And we respect every single one of them. Right? This is why we talk about them. We learn from their lives. But it's the Aqidah of the Ahlul Sunnah. It's ijma'. It's the absolute consensus. There is no difference of opinion. Right? That amongst all the Sahaba Kiram, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala is the greatest of this ummah. Wow. After all of the prophets, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala is the best of Allah's creation. After him, it's Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And this was what? Also the Aqidah of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. This was also the belief of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala says, خير هذه الأمة بعد نبيها أبو بكر وعمر. He says the best of this ummah after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Abu Bakr and then it's Umar. To the extent that he says when in his time of Khilafah, he says that if anybody says to me and give preference to me over Abu Bakr and Umar, then I will punish that person with the punishment of a slanderer. What's the punishment of a slanderer? 80 lashes. This is how strict Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala was on this Aqidah of the Ahlul Sunnah. And I'll finish on this last waqiyah. I've been told strictly to finish on 1240. I'll mention this very briefly and then I'll end. That the sun that rises, right? the sun was returned for Sayyidina Ali. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala an was sitting with the blessed head of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his lap. The time for Asr was going. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala an is in a predicament. That do I get up and disturb the sleep of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to pray my Asr? Or do I sit where I am, miss my Asr and not disturb the sleep of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What does he decide? He decides that devotion and love to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is greater. He stays where he is. The sun sets, Maghrib time starts, and he's a Sahabi. उनको नमाज की बहुत अहमियत थी. He understood the importance of Asr, particularly the most important prayer of the day. So he begins to cry. Tears flow from his face and fall on the blessed countenance, blessed face of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wakes up and he asks Sayyidina, did you pray your Asr? Sayyidina Ali replies, no, Rasulullah, I didn't want to disturb your prayer. And then what does the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He prays and asked for the sun to be returned so that Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala an can pray his Salat al-Asr. And what does mine and your Aka Sayyidi Ala Hazrat radiallahu ta'ala say on this? Mawla Ali ne wari teri neend par namaz और वो भी असर सबसे जो आला खतर की है साबित हुआ कि जुमला फराइज फुरू हैं असलुल उसूल बंदगी उस्ताद की है आखिर दावाना अल्हम्दुलिल्लाहि रब्बिल आलमीन.